I have the distinct pleasure of being joined by Ryan Kickland. I don't even know how to describe you. Let me see. Musician,
Makes two of us.
hammock, hammock connoisseur. Let me see.
I like that. You're off to a good start.
Vinyl collector, vintage gear, something or other. You know what you're doing with the vintage gear.
I think the simplest way to say it is, I'm a guy who collects music, appreciates music, researches music, makes music, and hunts out and collects things that help me listen to music. Yeah, I'm a music guy.
How did the vintage audio gear, should I call it obsession?
I think obsession is probably fair. We grew up. My stepdad had this Marantz set up, and so I've always had this affinity to Marantz stuff, just because I grew up with it and I like the way it sounds, and I've always had it around. And but that's where I remember thinking, I just something about the metal, something about the engineering that goes into audio gear and the beauty, the aesthetic of these machines that allow you to hear your music and in their own, ultimately with their own signature, right? And their own engineering and their own look and their own style. And it kind of comes with the territory that when I go out and buy record collections, I'm always hunting records. And, I've been buying collections for a long time. We used to own a record store. And so when I go out and buy collections, you often have an opportunity to grab the old turntable or grab the old receiver if they're no longer playing records or using their equipment. So that's probably where it started, bringing that stuff back home and then teaching myself how to do, how to clean it up and get it running again. And, which I'm still constantly learning. I'm no technician by any stretch, but I'm constantly trying to learn how to restore this gear and how to, best bring it back to life. So, it probably started there with, you get a few pieces home with a record collection and you start playing with it and you realize, oh, wow, this is a lot of fun and it looks really cool over there. And then get another piece. And I have a hard time letting go of stuff I've put the work into, because I just kind of bond with it, and all these pieces, all this, modern hi-fi as well as vintage hi-fi, all these pieces are so unique, the way they look, the way they operate, their features, their sound, just sonically what they do. And so, some people collect, cars or baseball cards, and I just about anything that's cool that has to do with music, I'm in, So I have a lot of gear around the house. I've got systems in every room that we sit in, basically has got a system in it. And I just tweak them all. I keep fine tuning each one until it, every time I look at it and listen to it, it makes me happy,
Sure.
And so it's just an obsession that really never, with audio, it's you're always searching, and that's part of the fun for me.
How many systems do you have in your house? Like complete systems that you can sit down and listen to?
Complete systems that I listen to, like, this room, this stuff is hooked up back here. This is kind of a smorgasbord of stuff that I just, when I'm down here cleaning or sorting records, this is like a casual, there's cool stuff up there and I just swap it around and listen to different amps and tape decks and stuff like that. But in the other side of this room, I've got, probably my more critical listening setup. And then I've got two more separate setups down at the end of this room that are for 45s and testing records and stuff down by the rest of my vinyl. And I've got a system upstairs in our living room. I've got a system upstairs in our front room, an old Marantz vintage system up there, bedroom system, and then an office system. I mean, literally every room will have some little, even if it's a small system with a turntable and a small vintage tube amp and a couple small speakers. I just try to make sure that you can listen to music everywhere in the house.
Do you have any thing that you're especially fond of, proud of? It doesn't necessarily have to be expensive or rare, but what when you think about what comes to mind when you think about your best pieces?
One of my favorite pieces, I have a lot of I love turntables. I just can't resist quality turntables from the 60s and 70s. They're just beautiful machines. I love the variety. I love, the variety in tone arms, the variety in plinths, the variety in, just the aesthetic, the functionality. They're just such cool machines. One of my favorites is one that I feature quite a bit on the Instagram is my Thorens Monster, which is the T126 MK2. And it's got an Infinity Black Widow tone arm on it. And that was one of the first really nice pieces of vintage gear. I had bought it from a woman who, I bought a record collection from a long time ago. And her husband had passed away within, I think, a year before that. And so she asked me if I wanted to buy the turntable too. And I did. And it needed some work, and I put a lot of time. It was such a beautiful table, and it had so much potential. It just had been sitting for so long. It needed some work. Nothing major, but I cleaned it up, fixed it up, got it running, and that was the first time I owned a turntable that someone had modified and really put, that was a top end piece of gear when he bought it. And he put, got this great, aftermarket tone arm and put it on there, matched a, Shure V15 cartridge up to that tone arm. And it was immaculate. And he'd just taken such good care of it. That was always a really special one for me because I feel like, every time I look at that, I think about this guy, and I think about the fact that he bought this thing new. He took great care of it. It was the conduit to his musical listening experience for God knows how long. And that thing is, I'm happy that it's in a house that every time I look at that thing, I appreciate what it is and what it's capable of, and it gets used. And so when I get rid of gear or sell gear or give it away or whatever, it's kind of that same spirit of, I love seeing these machines get used for their intended purpose, and I love it when people take care of their gear. That's on a vintage system that has a Marantz 2238 fully restored receiver, driving some of the large, the anniversary edition large Advent speakers, which I just love those old Advents. And then a Marantz top load cassette deck of 5420.
Yeah, that thing is sweet. That shows up
beautiful.
On your Instagram a lot.
It's one of the coolest looking It's not the best sounding. It sounds good, but it's not a it's not a Dragon or something. It's more of a recorder than a player by its intended purpose, but it sounds good and it looks absolutely incredible. No doubt. And then down here, I've got, another system this one is kind of whenever I can afford to get something nice and new, that I put it into this system down here. And I just got these Wharfdale Linton Heritage speakers, which I just love them more and more every time I sit down and listen to them. And I've got a Rega P3 and a couple pieces of some Marantz amp, and the new PM series, newish Marantz CD player, and then a a tube buffer down here for the CD player. So this is the one where if I get higher end new gear, it's going to ultimately end up down here in the record room. And then one of my other favorite pieces of gear is, I've gotten an Akai 1810 reel-to-reel upstairs. That's really fun. I collect old reels when I can find them. They're pretty scarce. And then I've got one of the Marantz stacks, the smaller, they're the smaller footprint Marantz 140 amp with the, I think it's the 3328 or 3228 preamp, and then the 104 tuner, that 3-piece. And that 140 Marantz amp is one of the most beautiful amplifiers from that era that I've ever seen. It's the 2 big blue windows, the 2 big meters, just like 2 big blue eyes. Sure. And it's just gorgeous. So that's one I'm still working on fitting into the right system with the, a worthy setup for that, right, for that series.
Back then, if it didn't have meters on it, it wasn't worth buying. It wasn't, or at least it wasn't going to get bought.
That's right. You better. Yeah, that was an indicator of true audio clout, right?
Exactly. Well, and it looked good, like you said. And I've had this conversation over and over and over again with people, especially in the high-end world, where sort of sonics are supreme, but at the same time, it does have to look good. Like you spent a little bit of time talking about how the things sound, and of course you grew up on Marantz and you obviously love that sound, and like it's got to sound good. There's a level of quality that you have to reach. It's not like it can sound like crap, maybe with the exception of your tape deck that looks so cool that it really doesn't matter how it sounds. But I said in another video that if Porsche or Ferrari looked like crap, nobody would have ever heard of them. And, these are things that we live with, grow old with, maybe even pass down to people. And so they do have to look good in addition to sounding good. It's not it's not mutually exclusive, but they do have to look good. It's better.
Yeah. I think, depending on the market and the audience, and, there are plenty of systems that sound terrific that don't, have a lot of, physical bells and whistles, that don't have a ton of aesthetic appeal. And that is fine for a lot of people, and I think if you have a certain, for me, I'm just too particular about the experience of sitting down and listening to music that, one might call it anal. Because if I'm sitting down and I'm listening to music, I just want the whole environment to work. I want it to sound great, and I will chase that forever with each system until I can sit down and feel like, okay, this is very enjoyable. But it will just nag at me if I've got, a dent in the front panel of one of those pieces of equipment in that setup, or if I've got, a stand that just, I just don't like it, and it just eats at me. So it's, for me, for my personality, and for I'm sure a lot of people that invest either a lot of time or money into gear, into audio gear, that's a really important factor, right? Is how does the whole environment make you feel, right? And part of that is how it looks.
Part of the reason why I do these videos is to just sort of highlight some people doing cool stuff and good things in the world. And I really like what you're putting out there online, and, keep doing it, keep the persistence up. But I want to use this platform to highlight some charitable organizations, and I asked you to highlight one that is of particular interest to you. So, did you have a charitable organization that we can link people to, and you can tell people about?
This might be kind of a, might feel like a little bit of a cop out or a broad brush, but there's a reason for it, and that's check out your local chapter of the United Way and support the United Way. And the reason I say that is because I served on the United Way board for years here. And one of the things I like about, there's so many great charities, and especially for people who are unsure of what to do and where to give, because charitable donations and charitable giving can feel a bit like walking into a record store or getting into gear.
Good point.
Who do I get? Where do I give my money? And are they going to use it the right way? And so many things I could support. So the reason I bring that up is because, I was able to see for years firsthand, and of course, every chapter is a little bit different, but I can speak locally that, every chapter in every region has such incredible line of sight to all these different nonprofits that are doing incredible things and that are trying to navigate this even more and more challenging environment of grants drying up and funding going away and volunteers being harder to find. So one thing I love about just kind of bringing it back to, being aware at least and doing some research into your local United Way chapter is dollars that go into the United Way are allocated and then given to organizations, nonprofits in your local area that are doing really good things that are, part of what our process was on the United Way board was going out and auditing all these nonprofits every year and going there and seeing firsthand what they do, who they help, how they do it, the passion of the people that are running these organizations, and then allocating all those dollars, as equitably as you possibly can, but also taking into consideration which of these organizations are really getting results, are really helping people. And there's so much need generally in every community, and it's mind-blowing to see the amount of volunteer work that's happening behind the scenes every day. Just incredible people doing really special things. And so I just say that's a good place to start for people. It's a good alternative if you're feeling overwhelmed. And just from my personal experience, whether it's ending up in, domestic abuse crisis centers or, food programs, backpack programs for kids so they have food when they're not in school, or, emergency supplies. I mean, it's whatever that critical need is in the community. So much of that gets help from supporting United Way.
That's fantastic. I mean, I, for one, had no idea that that's how they worked, so that's great. I'm sure lots of people appreciate that. They're like a clearinghouse, essentially pre-vetted, clearinghouse for local charity. So that's fantastic. Well, Ryan, thanks a lot, man. I'll see you on the internet, and thanks a lot.
Sounds good. Good talking to you.
See you, Ryan.
Take care.